For decades, Canada and the United States have shared a close and deeply intertwined alliance, one that has shaped the destinies of both nations. This relationship has been marked by a spirit of cooperation, trust, and shared values, with both countries often standing shoulder to shoulder on the world stage. Their partnership has been built on economic integration, robust cross-border trade, and mutual defense commitments through organizations like NATO. The two economies are so closely linked that millions of jobs and countless businesses depend on the smooth flow of goods and services across the border every single day. But the return of President Trump in 2025 has brought a wave of aggressive protectionism, with sweeping tariffs on Canadian exports and open threats to scrap the USMCA trade agreement. These moves have sent shockwaves through Canadian industries, shaking the very foundation of this long-standing partnership, and leaving many Canadians anxious about the future. The new Donroe Doctrine signals a bold push for American dominance in North America, leaving Canada feeling increasingly sidelined and vulnerable to the whims of its powerful neighbor. The sense of trust that once defined the relationship is now under serious strain. In response, Prime Minister Mark Carney is leading a determined push to diversify Canada's trade relationships. His government is actively seeking new partners in Asia and Europe, aiming to reduce the country's heavy reliance on the US market and build a more resilient economic future. The era of assuming the US as a reliable partner is over. Now, Canada stands at a crossroads, forced to rethink its economic strategy and chart a new course in an increasingly uncertain world. Prime Minister Carney's pivot to China is a calculated response to US unpredictability. Facing existential risks from US tariffs and threats to the USMCA, Carney's government launched a trade diversification strategy to reduce dependence on the American market. Canada's over-reliance on the US for oil exports has proven risky, especially after past pipeline cancellations. By engaging China, Carney asserts Canadian independence and signals that Canada won't be confined to a subordinate role. The move is also about seizing long-term opportunities in Asia's growing markets. Despite past disputes, the deal with China is seen as necessary for Canada's prosperity and autonomy in a shifting world. The 2027, Back-to-9, Guineas-Stombin 26ken, Canada-China Trade Pact is a targeted agreement crafted after months of intense negotiations between the two countries. It represents a significant step forward in redefining their economic relationship, especially after years of trade tensions and uncertainty. The deal is aimed at easing economic pain on both sides, providing much-needed stability for businesses and investors. Both governments hope this agreement will help restore confidence and encourage new investments in key sectors. Under the new terms, Canada will slash tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles from a steep 100% down to just 6.1% for up to 49,000 vehicles annually. This quota could rise to 70,000 vehicles within 5 years, depending on market demand and regulatory reviews. This move opens the Canadian market to a wave of affordable Chinese EVs, giving consumers more choices and potentially lowering prices. However, it also raises serious concerns for North American automakers and Ontario's auto sector, who fear increased competition and job losses. In return, China will cut tariffs on Canadian canola seed from a punishing 84% to just 15%, providing much-needed relief to prairie farmers who have struggled with export barriers and falling prices in recent years. China will also remove tariffs on other key Canadian exports, including canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and peas for 2026. This is expected to boost sales and help Canadian producers regain lost ground in the Chinese market. These changes offer a lifeline to Canadian agriculture and fisheries, supporting rural communities and helping to secure jobs across the country. There are also reports of China easing visa requirements for Canadians, aiming to boost business and tourism ties. If confirmed, this could make travel and collaboration between the two nations easier than ever before, opening new doors for cultural and economic exchange. Canada's outreach to China was driven by mounting pressure from the Trump administration's America First policies. U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods and threats to the USMCA created economic instability and questioned Canada's sovereignty. Trump's rhetoric, including talk of making Canada the 51st state, fueled Ottawa's resolve to assert independence. In response, Canada announced a major military expansion and accelerated its trade pivot to China. The deal with China is both a necessity and a message. Canada will not accept a subordinate role. By engaging with China, Canada signals to Washington that its partnership cannot be taken for granted. The Canada-China trade deal sparked mixed reactions at home and abroad. In Washington, officials warned the deal could undermine North American unity, but President Trump's response was characteristically transactional. Within Canada, Prairie leaders praised the relief for farmers, while Ontario's premier warned of risks to the auto sector and potential job losses. The agreement highlights deep regional divides and the challenge of balancing national trade policy. For some, it's a pragmatic solution to economic pain. For others, a threat to domestic industry. The debate underscores the complexity of Canada's new economic direction. The China deal marks a pivotal turning point for Canada's economic strategy and its long-term sovereignty. For decades, Canada has relied heavily on its southern neighbor, the United States, for trade and economic growth. Now, by forging new agreements with China, Canada is signaling a bold willingness to chart its own course and diversify its global partnerships. Affordable Chinese electric vehicles could soon capture a significant share of the Canadian market, offering consumers more choices and lower prices. While this benefits everyday Canadians, it also presents a real challenge for domestic manufacturers, who must now innovate and adapt to stay competitive in a rapidly changing industry. More importantly, Canada is deliberately diversifying its trade relationships to reduce its vulnerability to sudden U.S. policy shifts or economic downturns. By expanding its network of trading partners, Canada aims to create a more stable and secure economic future. The goal isn't to replace the United States as a key partner, but to build a more resilient economic foundation that can withstand global uncertainties and foster sustainable growth for generations to come. Managing strong and sometimes competing ties with both China and the U.S. will test Canada's diplomatic skill and strategic vision. Navigating these complex relationships will require careful negotiation and a clear sense of national priorities. Prime Minister Carney's bold gamble could ultimately redefine Canada's global role, if the benefits of diversification outweigh the risks. The world is watching to see if Canada can successfully balance opportunity and caution on the international stage. The path ahead is uncertain, filled with both promise and potential pitfalls, but Canada is choosing a future less dependent on its southern neighbor and more open to the world.